Cystic fibrosis is one of the more commonly known single gene disorders, and it's a condition that a mutated gene causes the body to produce very thick and sticky mucus. So it's not a type of mucus that you're just going to have when you're sick, but they build up inside of your blood vessels and also inside of your organs. If you see the items below, it says it can cause different lung infections because you may have these mucus build up in your lungs, and it's going to make your lungs work harder. It's harder to breathe. You're going to also have congestion. Pancreas can also have mucus build up, and because pancreas creates different enzymes and hormones to break your food down to digest, it's going to be harder to break down and absorb food even though you're eating the same amount. Because this is a genetic disorder, in early stage for infants, it's going to delay growth and also can create different digestive problems, pneumonia, and also fatigue. That means you're going to be tired constantly and all the time. This is a disorder that is very common to Caucasians. About 1 in 29 Caucasians have the gene for cystic fibrosis. Now, like I said, having the gene does not mean you're going to have it. You need 2 of these recessive genes in order to have the disorder apparent. However, if you have 2 parents with this gene, then you have a higher chance of developing cystic fibrosis as a child. It is the most common and the most deadly genetic disorder for Caucasians in North America. Because it is a genetic disorder, you're not going to be able to completely heal it, but you can have some treatment options depending on the severity of your condition. So for example, you may have antibiotics and special type of diet. If your condition is very severe, like the picture that you see on the right side, where you have a lot of these mucus build up inside, you're going to need to have a lung transplant. So here are some pictures to help you understand. On the left side, you see the picture of the cystic fibrosis lung, where you see a lot of these white buildups. These are the mucus that builds up in your lungs. Whereas if you have healthy lungs, you're not really going to see much of the lungs here because they're soft tissue, and you can really see the harder ones, which is the bones that you have, the bone skeletal structure. And then on the picture on the right, you'll see how the normal airway is going to have clear and nicely developed tube, whereas when you have cystic fibrosis, you're going to have mucus built up, and you're also going to have different types of infections because of those mucus buildup. So you're going to have narrowed airway that's going to stop you from having normal air intake. Color blindness is one of the single gene disorders that you can have, although it may be caused from different genes with different mutation. This is also known as color vision deficiency. And we have several different types of color blindness. Usually when we say you're colorblind, we're not talking about a complete colorblind where you don't see any colors, but we are more focusing on red-green vision deficiency, which is the most common color blindness, and also it's something that you can find out fairly easily compared to other color blindness that we're going to look into. So first, red-green vision deficiency appears in about 8 in 100 males and about 1 in 200 females. So that means if you're a guy, you're more likely to have red-green color deficiency, and if you're especially from Northern European ancestry, you are more likely to have red-green vision deficiency. The easy way to tell if you have red-green vision deficiency is to take Ishihara test, which I have uploaded on Google Classroom for you to try. So it's not like you're not going to see red and green. It's just red and green color look very similar to those who have red and green vision deficiency. So here's an example of what they see. You can see that the greens are pretty much similar. It's a little more of the yellow tone, but when you see red, it's going to look more like green than the red color. So they don't have that contrast that you may see. They look very similar, almost identical. Now, blue-yellow vision deficiency is not as common as the red and green one, and it affects males and females equally. It happens in fewer than 1 in 10,000 cases. And the interesting fact is that this deficiency is caused more from non-genetic mechanisms. So for example, either if you have diabetes or if you have any brain injuries and you hurt certain part of your brain, you may actually suffer with blue-yellow vision deficiency. Now, the parts that you may say is like, oh, how are they going to see blue and yellow color? They're going to see blue and yellow in a different hue, just like the red and green deficiency. With the blue, you're going to confuse it with green color a little more. With yellow, you're going to confuse it with more like a pinkish violet color. And you'll see the picture on the next slide. Now, having a complete color vision deficiency is very rare. In fact, it happens about 1 in 30,000. And it means you only see things in black, white, and gray. So if you have a filter with a grayscale, that's how people are going to see things if they have complete color vision deficiency. Like I said, it's not so common, but it happens. So here's an example picture of blue-yellow color deficiency. As you can see, you're going to see the yellow color here that kind of comes out to be a pinkish color. This darker yellow too, it comes out more like a pinkish violetish color. If you notice, red still looks the same. Now for the blue, it comes out a little more with a greenish blue, and then green hue is kind of grayish tone. Same thing, blue here, you have this tone. So it's going to change your colors a little bit, but doesn't mean that you can see any colors. Now let's go ahead and take a look at chromosomal disorders. Before we look into it, we have to find out how many chromosomes we have in our human bodies. If you have watched the videos for Brain Pop, you probably know the answer. Most humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Now I said most human beings because some of other people are going to have more than 23 pairs or less than 23 pairs of chromosomes. This is something that you're going to have already when you're born because it happens during your cell division. So when you have the sperm cell and the egg cell and you create embryo, you may have some sort of problems. Either your division doesn't happen properly, or it happened too quickly, or many different reasons. But because your cell division was not completely done in a proper way, you are going to have that DNA, your gene, inside of your body, and it's going to affect how you are going to be functioning. Now, one of the examples that we see here is Down syndrome. Down syndrome is characterized by having 3 of chromosome 21. We have a picture on the next slide, but basically what happens is that you have 23 pairs of chromosome, and let's say you number them from chromosome 1 all the way to 23. And you're going to have 2 of those chromosomes per pair because you get 1 from your mom and 1 from your dad. Now, for chromosome number 21, instead of 2 chromosomes, you're going to have 3. When you have Down syndrome, you may have delayed mental or social development, and you can characterize them by flattened face features and upward slanted eyes. And this is across different ethnic groups. It's not just one ethnic group that would have these features, but it's going to be across different ethnic groups and different culture. You're going to have similar features. Most of these are not genetic, and studies says as mother's age increases, the risk of having a baby with Down syndrome also increases. It doesn't mean that if you have babies when you're older, you're going to have babies with Down syndrome. It's just your risk may increase, and depending on your beliefs and what you want to do, people may choose to either have their own babies or say, hey, the risk is too great, I'm not going to have babies, maybe I'll adopt or not have babies at all. So this is a picture that I was talking about, and as you can see, number 1 through all the way here, 23. You'll see 22, and then this is 23, which determines your gender. So if it's XX, you're a female. XY, you're going to be a male. Now, it has the 21 chromosome enlarged and gives you 3 instead of 2. So every other one would have 2, a pair. 21 will have 3 chromosomes. And these are some basic features. I tried to find different ethnic group. It doesn't matter if you're Asian, if you're Caucasian, if you're Hispanic, you're all going to have similar facial features when you have Down syndrome. Now, you may wonder if it's possible to test for different genetic disorders that are not apparent. Oftentimes, you may have genetic testing when you are still in your mom's stomach. And if they're not apparent when you were born, chances are they may not be so harmful in your day-to-day activity until you find some difficulties or challenges. Now, every cell in your body has the same DNA except for sex cells. So when you check your sample of either blood or body tissue, you can check and see if you have any genetic disorders. Now, what if a pregnant woman wants to find out if her baby would have any genetic disorders? We have a couple of different tests that you can take. And the first one is called amniocentesis because of what you use for this test. When the fetus is about 16 to 18 weeks old, which means they're going to be roughly about 4 to 4.5 months old, you can use this test by using a small amount of amniotic fluid. So amniotic fluid is the water that surrounds the baby inside of a mom's belly or inside of her uterus. And basically you would put a needle through and draw a little bit of that amniotic fluid and check for any genetic disorders. When you do that, you can identify the gender, age, and genetic problems of the baby. So this is how the amniocentesis test is going to be. You're not going to just put a needle through a pregnant woman's belly. You'll actually have to use the ultrasound machine to see if you're not poking the baby. And then you're going to go ahead and carefully put a needle through to get the amniotic fluid out of the belly. So this is a real version of it, and this is the picture where you would see how things are happening inside. Chorionic villus sampling is another way to check baby's disorder, and this one can be done actually a little earlier than the other one, when the fetus is about 10 to 12 weeks old. So about 2.5 or 3 months old, you can check for the baby, and you actually use a small sample of placenta for this test. So when you see this picture, the needle actually pokes through the placenta part, not the actual amniotic fluid or the baby. And it looks similar because you have to make sure that you're not poking the baby, you're only getting the sample from placenta. And this is only to test genetic disorders. Genetic counseling is the last part of this lesson, and basically it is counseling with a professional with medical background and genetic training. So not all doctors are going to give you genetic counseling, but for those who need counseling, people who are trained in genetics and also have some sort of medical background will help you out. Now, what they do is basically when you go and talk to them, they may explain the risks of having genetic disorders in your family based on what you or your spouse may have. Let's say you guys both get tested and you find out that one of you or both of you have a risk, or you guys are carrying recessive genes, and the genetic counselor may say, hey, because you guys have both of this recessive gene, the chances of having a baby with a genetic disorder may be 25%, maybe 50%, or 75%. And it may help families to make decisions in family planning or treatment planning. So when you have family plans, for example, if you want to have babies of your own, or maybe you want to adopt, like I said, or if you choose to have a baby with a disorder, how are you going to provide care, medical care, or educational care, different treatment plans, because that may be something that you want to take into consideration. And also, different states are going to require newborns to be tested for different kind of disorders. And here are some examples of the testing they do. The first one is called phenylketonuria, or PKU, where you may have problems with having high amount of protein, and it can actually cause mental retardation. Other one is sickle cell anemia and cystic fibrosis, which we have covered in the lesson previously. The purpose of genetic counseling is not to have abortion for the families with a high risk of genetic disorder, but to help families to ensure the best start in life for their babies. If they choose to have babies despite of the high risk, or despite the fact that they know that they're going to have babies with disorders, you want to make sure you provide information and support for those families, because oftentimes they may not know what it's like to have those disorders, and you may not know how to raise kids with certain types of disorder. So it educates parents and families to ensure that their babies are going to have the best start for their life. And this is for the lesson questions that you're going to work on. Let me just give you a couple of tips for these questions. Number one is pretty simple. You just have to find the difference between a mutation and a mutagen. This is more of a definition type. Now for number two, I always have a lot of questions for this number question. Why are some diseases more common in certain groups of people, such as Caucasians or African Americans or Asians or so forth? Think about in terms of how the world was before we have all these cool technologies and transportation. It may give you some ideas on why certain groups will have certain diseases. And number three, why might it be important to find out whether you carry a recessive gene for a genetic disorder? Think about how you're going to have different genetic disorders and how they are going to be more apparent when you have recessive genes. And last but not least, why are most genetic disorders considered lifelong diseases? Why do you think they are lifelong instead of something that you can get over with and you can completely cure it? So good luck with it, and I'll see you guys later.